Thank you. Thank you very much. I was just wanting to respond to something that Brian Cranwell had said about how do we give tools to people to enable them to minister with each other, to give them the spiritual tools for the journey. And I'm just going to do a little plug for an initiative that's in the diocese at the moment. Have a lot of funding to develop a particular spiritual method of spiritual accompaniment, which was developed for children but works with all ages, and we're calling it Stories for the Soul. Can you hear me all right? Is that all right? It's based on a godly play method, for those who've heard it, but basically it allows people to gather in a circle to share a story which is told using real objects so that people can connect with it, to connect that with their lives, to think about the spiritual meaning of it, to share fellowship, prayer, to minister with each other. And we're doing that in care settings, including with people with dementia, and we're having amazing results of people who feel connected with each other, who are able to mentor each other in their spiritual journey. And one particular thing that we're advertising at the moment is something called Stories for the Soul at a church, the Vine. So there's some information about that up on the board. But we're offering training, introductory days, and really feel that it's enabling people to minister with each other as they get older. Thank you.
Thank you for your input earlier in the day. It's much appreciated. I wonder, in thinking about loneliness and social isolation, do we think that it has increased over the years? And if so, what do we think are the causes of that? It was interesting to hear, I think, about the indicators, things which may well lead to people being more socially isolated, but I wonder what we think the causes are. That is, if there has been an increase. I don't know what the evidence might say.
If I can start with that, certainly in terms of the increase, yes, there has. I was looking at one of our annual reports from the 1980s, and the same message was in the report this year. But it was about the increase in old people within Sheffield. It's a growing population, it's a growing older population. There's been budget cuts all over the city, and that increase was expected to raise by about 30% by a particular year. Now, it has increased, and that's, I think, there's not necessarily more people, percentage-wise, experiencing loneliness and isolation. I think there's more people generally experiencing loneliness and isolation. And there's perhaps more recognition.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, as you say, the research evidence tells us that in terms of the proportion of the population suffering from loneliness, it's not getting any worse. But what we are seeing is an increasingly ageing population. So we're having more older people within our population. And that, of course, means that then the numbers of lonely people will increase. And in terms of what the sort of causes, the kind of root causes are, if you like, I think it's got a lot to do with actually the way we live and the way our communities live. And we're very much more geographically dispersed now than perhaps we were 50 years ago when, many generations of the same family would stay within the same town. And now, of course, you see people not just moving across the country, but moving across the other side of the world. And I think that's had quite a big impact on our ability to stay socially connected.
Like all churches, I'm sure, we have a lot of informal friendship-based visiting that goes on one-to-one. But when we recently suggested the possibility of setting up on the church's behalf a befriending scheme, we were told by our own safeguarding team, which was then backed up at diocesan level, that we couldn't do that it would have to be at least 2 people going in. And the pastoral team are only really able to go in, or only allowed to go in, if you like, one-to-one, because they more or less said that's the only way we can operate, and that's what we're going to do. But to actually set up a befriending scheme for our church the safeguarding people put a stop to it and said we couldn't do it.
In terms of SM4Cs, we've been doing friendly visiting since 1966, and it has always been one-to-one. Now, we've got all the policies that back up everything we do, and I think you've got to also take a reasonable view on it as well. And if you're always going to insist on 2 people going, then the issue of loneliness and isolation is going to continue, because nobody's ever going to combat it or attempt to combat it. We also DBS every volunteer that comes through. We go through a rigorous recruitment process. So we do the application stage, we check references, we do the DBSs, we do an interview. Sorry, with your safeguarding. That's right. We do offer training and we address boundaries. The volunteers, they're not expected or they're not allowed to, perhaps with us, they're not allowed to take people out.
Yeah.
That's a given. It's there as a friendly visiting case. Now, what I've said on many occasions and what I've said today is that if there is anybody within churches that wants to volunteer and wants to do friendly visiting, then we would welcome you. We've got over 100 volunteers at this moment, or about 100 volunteers at this time. The maximum that we can see us getting to with the resources we've got is about 115. And then it's going to come down to the trustees making a decision as to whether to stop recruitment or put more resources in. My trustees will not want to stop recruitment because they're there to serve a purpose. They're there to help combat loneliness and isolation amongst older people. So they will put whatever resources necessary.
In a society which is quite consumerist at times, how do we avoid the situation where either people sit there and say, what the church should do this for me, so we're going to demand services from the church, or be in a situation where the church decides, well, people ought to do this. How do we encourage people of all ages, and particularly of older age groups, to actually be a part of delivering those activities rather than... There was one church I was a part of many years ago, and somebody said, we're old now, the church ought to do things for us. And I was so struck, well, no, surely part of this should be about enabling older people to develop their own ministries at whatever age. How do we encourage that? What are the tools that we can use to stop it becoming about either what we do for older people as a church, or older people saying, well, you ought to do this for me? How do we get across that sort of consumerist barrier and empower people?
Could I just respond briefly to that? Here in the cathedral, we use older people, if you like, to look after the godly play, for instance. We have a very active and energetic toddlers group here on a Thursday. The whole nave is full of parents and toddlers, and it is the older members of the congregation that supervise and run those events. That's just 2 examples. Any comments from the team?
Yeah. Okay, from SM4C's point of view, we've got a split between the age groups of our volunteers. And the majority of them are either 20 to 30 or they're retired, so they're 60 plus. Now, I think there's something like 28 or 30% of our total volunteer base which is 60 plus. So those are all the people who are contributing to society. Most of them are church members as well. So I think in terms of consumerism and what have you, I think for them, older people to be really contributing and being involved is the right approach.
How do we do that? How do we encourage them to get involved?
That's a really good question, and something that we want to encourage as well. I mentioned earlier about trying to engage with different churches, and some churches are more than happy to speak to us, and there's a few that just don't want to know us. I don't know the reason for that, apart from what I said earlier. We're more than happy to go in and speak to congregations, and we have done. We're more than happy to go into any church group, any Mothers Union, any group where there's older people meeting, and offer ourselves as a way to really deliver mission and ministry.
One of the things that was just said, which made me put my hand up, was about getting elderly people into our churches. And for about 12 years, we've had a third age ministry. And that has been for all. We've had lots of different activities. But the success of that third age ministry was that before we started, we got a lot of elderly, if you like, the same age, of our members to be our teams, to be our helpers. So we were able to cope that way. And coming up in April, we'll have been running our Natter group for a year. It will be a year old. And that is led by also the Natter group age people. They are giving their services. They don't want to come for coffee to eat and be entertained. They want to do the entertaining. So we've got people coming in, and last week it was 18 adults from the area. We don't know who they are because they don't sign up, but they come in for coffee, and for an hour or so we'll stay and talk. And we think we are meeting a definite need, but we're also meeting the need of some of our older worshippers. So it's a win-win. And I'd encourage other people to look for the team to do it first, so you can also have a win-win. Thank you.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's all about finding, and this answers your question to some degree as well, it's also about finding the niche for the individual, because everybody here is an individual. I was in a group of individuals at the back. I know all about individuals. But, if you find what that person is really wanting, then you can deliver it, like the Natter group. For SM4Cs, not everybody wants to be a friendly visitor. Not everybody's cut out to be a friendly visitor. But there are other ways of reducing and preventing loneliness and isolation, including Natter groups and various things. But it really is about finding what that person is interested in and meeting their need as well.
Oh, just off that comment as well, it is looking at what each person really needs, and I'm really passionate about that. And in my work, I've seen the work of SM4Cs, and I've been so impressed at the way the volunteers come in and they work with each person individually and find what stimulates them, what they want to talk about, and off the back of sort of seeing that work of SM4Cs, I've set up a reminiscence collection. Some of you might have heard of reminiscence, using older objects on different themes to help spark memories for people living with dementia. And I'm just doing a bit of a plug because we've got a lending collection at Montgomery Theatre and one at Church House in Rotherham that are free to borrow. And I'm really passionate about people being able to be equipped to run sessions, to lead lunch clubs, to go into care homes. We've got so many fantastic resources for people to borrow and use. And I'm going to do a bit of a plug because we've got a Creative Dementia Day happening at Church House on the 28th of April. and we'll be exploring the different creative ways that we can support people living with dementia. But it's just been fantastic today to just hear about all the work that is happening, and I think Sheffield's a very special place for that. And I just, thank you for championing, honouring older people. So thank you.
I'm just going to be brief, but 3 years ago I was widowed and I sank to the bottom. I thought I was useless, and it took a long time to pull myself out. But I think what I want to say is that now I'm on top of the world, and I think part of it is that I feel valued, and I think that's important. I can't cook. I once was entered can't cook, won't cook. But we make, and there's another lady, we make cakes. We're doing new skills, and we're encouraging each other. And I feel in the cathedral, I don't feel 80. Some days I feel 18, I might be 28. But I think it is making people, whatever they do, whatever their age, to feel valued.
Thank you. I think we all recognise that, in particular, that men don't engage in the same sort of activities that women engage in, and that they can be an even more difficult group to reach than the ladies. And I'm just wondering if the panel has any suggestions as to things that we can think about when we're trying to address the needs of men.
One of the things that we do in our church is a men's breakfast morning. And it's been going for, about 3 years now, and it's been really successful. And I think it started maybe with some men whose wives had died, just a few people. But it's grown, and now non-Christian men come to it from the estate. We used to have a bus that went into the estate to reach the people who didn't want church, and they used to sit on a bus and hear the gospel. And those people have come and they've brought the friends, and it's really successful now. So that is, a real positive thing to do in your community.
I think that we shouldn't overplay the separation between men and women. I think given the right kind of context and the right kind of community, I think work and relationships and friendships across the genders are really, really helpful. We need each other. We need each other's kind of intelligence and experience of life. But I'm not dismissing the question, so I'm going to be positive and to say that I've been involved over a number of years in slowly encouraging men to tell their stories. And that was helped particularly in one ministry that I had, where we built a relationship between the residential care home and the church primary school, where the older men in the residential care home became an amazing resource around telling the story of war and remembering. And that then generated a kind of confidence in feeling that your story is interesting and worthwhile and important, particularly across the generations. And that developed into quite a long-term afternoon, I think, over dominoes, when the men very informally chewed the cud and reflected on what life was like. So that's one element. I mean, I take what everyone said about some of the constraints that we work in. Don't let the safeguarding team have the last word. Deal with them with whatever Sheffield steel you've got and sort it. But also, let's not forget that church at its best is a community building enterprise We make relationships, we listen to each other, we keep an eye out for each other. Those informal acts of kindness make an enormous difference in different sorts of ways. And religion at its best is a narrating, storytelling religion. So I think the resources around minimizing isolation and building connections and deepening our spiritual awareness are embedded in many of the practices that we are engaged in, day out.
Could I just ask Claire whether there is a difference in the loneliness of men and women, and does loneliness in men affect them differently health-wise to women?
Higher levels of loneliness in women than in men, in older people. In terms of the health effects and the social effects, there's no real differences between the genders. So if an older man is lonely, they're likely to have similar health effects, social effects than an older woman have. But we do know that there are more older women who are at risk, who are vulnerable, than there are older men. That's not obviously to say that it's not a very important group to reach. And as I mentioned in my talk, Age UK run their Men in Sheds programme. That's one example of a very successful programme that's specific to men.
Well, that basically concludes the plenary session. And of course, the next question is where do we go from here? We hope that this day will be a launching pad, a springboard for you to continue these conversations in your own parishes and locality. We hope that this day won't just have been a talking shop, so to speak. You've raised many issues in your questions, and perhaps you should be beginning to sort of address these questions in your own situations. We hope you will find the resource document useful, and we pray that you will use the resource group to your advantage. We hope to get more stuff on the websites, the various websites, and today's recordings, video recordings, will also be available on the website. We also want to hear from you. We want to hear from your ideas and the things that you're doing in your parishes, so that we again can use them as a resource and example to other parishes. And one last thing on ministry to men. You'll find in this book some suggestions about ministry to men, and also nostalgia is a good place to start. I find that men, for some reason, when they're given the opportunity to speak, will speak, and especially on nostalgia and their experiences of life, especially the older generation. And so it leaves me, before I hand over to Jerry for our final prayers, to thank James and Claire and Sue and Mark for their contributions. Shall we give them?